Hey traders, welcome back to another Sunday video. Sorry for the less than usual quality on the audio. I am actually recording this while on vacation, but still wanted to make sure I discussed some ideas that I'm looking for. As even when I'm on the go, I still am keeping an eye on the charts. And especially this week, where we had some interesting stuff come into the Commitment of Traders report that I want to talk about, and some unique setups that I'm seeing right now on things like the NASDAQ and an update on my gold ideas, and of course on the FX side as well. All I ask is as we get started with this video, if you could help me out by hitting the thumbs up button and subscribing to the channel if you are new. So gonna just jump in right quick to a NASDAQ idea that I'm seeing here. So if we zoom in a little bit on what we saw actually take place with the NASDAQ last week, I think that I'm starting to get to the point where we actually look like we have shown signs, shown evidence, if you will, that buyers are actually looking strong here. And so, what we can point to with that is that you have, of course, this higher low that came in last week, which was, something that I was paying attention to. But then what's really interesting is that we actually broke and closed above that level of resistance that we've talked about on the channel for multiple weeks now. So that was a really good signal to me that price action looks confidently trying to rise here, that price action looks good, but that's not the only thing that I noticed. So if I switch over really quick to the Edgefinder's top setups page, you'll see that NASDAQ is getting a very strong reading for the first time in a while. Noticeable, gold has really dropped in score, and we'll talk about that more in just a second. But when we look at the NASDAQ, what we see here is we're getting a plus 11 score, and specifically the commitment of traders data, which is institutional money, seems to be accumulating NASDAQ. So check this out. If we take a look at the institutional latest COT buys and sells that you can see here on the screen right here. So if we select NASDAQ, what you'll see is that in the latest filing, there was significantly more buying of the NASDAQ that took place. Specifically, we can see under the change in long contracts and change in short contracts in the latest week, we had 4,099. That's a pretty substantial big increase in long contracts. Excuse me. And at the same time, we had a pretty significant decrease in short positioning. So this was a very bullish past week in the NASDAQ. So I'm looking at that and I'm saying, okay, that's a great signal. The other things that we've been talking about on the show here recently are if we take a look at our US economic heat map, it's really not all that bad. Meanwhile, the market has been, suggesting that we're going to fall off a bridge, right? The headlines are so scary, tariffs are going to run us into the ground and all this and that. Well, meanwhile, we have inflation that's holding in okay. We have labor statistics which are, relatively stable. We'll get more of that coming up pretty soon with the next NFP report coming around the corner. But I wouldn't say that even though this is not, a shining example of an amazing, U.S. economy relative to forecasts, right? A lot of our actual numbers are missing. Some of them are just narrowly hitting it. But the point is, it's certainly not, in my opinion, a good scenario to try and say, oh, yeah, no, the US economy is crashing into a recession. And that's where many people have been kind of suggesting we're going. So when I look at this, I say, okay, well, we had a strong closure above that Wednesday level, which is something I've been talking about on my channel for weeks now, right? A couple weeks since we had that big Wednesday up day and we faded, right? What we've seen since then has been decisively a close above that level. So actually going into this week, what I'm looking for is a retracement of this kind of move here, and then looking for an opportunity to actually join the move. So if we can get some kind of retracement in the early portions of this coming week, I'm probably going to join the NASDAQ trade with a long position and a stop loss below structure. I think that we've actually broken this downward structure that we're in, and I think that the market remains overly pessimistic. We can see that in some of our market sentiment indicators. So when we pull up the put to call ratio, you can see we're still elevated in the put to call ratio, which shows you that market sentiment is still pretty scared. Although, again, we did get a spike lower in the put to call ratio. That's where I'm saying if we get a pullback, sellers may kind of rush in again, get scared, and that would be an opportunity, in my view, to potentially pick up some long positioning. The investor sentiment survey that we reference often in this show or this channel, you can see continues to point very bearish, right? So people are really still overly pessimistic on this market. And that's where I think we may have room to start to see more of a short squeeze to the upside. Again, I think inflation is cooling off. Oil prices are remaining low, which is another positive for the inflation story. And I think that the Fed has room to potentially cut interest rates a couple times this year. So I think we have a good scenario. I don't think that so far we had, for example, Google earnings came out, which is a stock that I own. Pretty good earnings, right? They beat on the top and bottom lines. And this is important if you're an index trader because, of course, you want to look at the big players within the indices. And Google is a stock that I have, owned and loved for a long time, and looked great in their earnings report. So I think we're getting some good guidance from the leaders of the kind of the story, right? We also saw Apple has had a really nice bounce back here. You have Amazon performing pretty well, and a very controversial and speculative stock that I own, which is Tesla, right? This thing's been controversial since I initially bought it back in 2020. But this thing is ripping here, up 10% on Friday, even though they had terrible earnings. Prospect of Elon Musk coming back into the picture is potentially a positive here. But let's move on. Talk a little bit about the dollar index and gold, because I know a lot of people who watch this channel are also interested in gold. By the way, before we move on, let me just remind you that our tools are currently 40% off. We have huge discounts available in the description down below. And if you'd like to take advantage of that, again, it's 40% off. I don't have my pin on this laptop, so let me just write this. It's 40% off. It's a one-time payment, and you can get access using the links below. There you go. So there's all the information about the sale if you have not already taken advantage of it. Like I said, it's our biggest discount that we do all year long, and it's coming to a close here shortly. So I just wanted to make sure people who have been thinking about it or waiting for an opportunity to pick up the Edge Finder at discount, don't miss your chance. All of that can be found in the description below. So when we look at the dollar index, right? Dollar index does look a little bit stretched to the downside. Let's be fair here, right? We've had just a pretty much one-sided move to the downside here. Now, as we start to retrace, the question will be, do we get, this 38.2% retracement? Do we see back up to the 50, back up to 61.8? I would say this whole region is kind of a valid area for sellers to potentially step back in and to see this thing continue lower. That being said, that leaves us some oversold status to work off. Maybe we have a little bit of a bounce coming for the US dollar, but here's where that impacts my trade on gold. So you guys may know that I went long gold, still love gold from a thematic kind of all this uncertainty standpoint. But my system told me something that was really important. And I'll go into this because this is a great example. So I love the technical setup. We came down to support, bounced off that area, and then now, dipped previously below it for a brief time and then came back. So I'm about break even on this trade at the time of recording this. But I want to show you something that showed up in the Edge Finder's COT data, which of course is again tracking what institutions are doing. You'll see gold is all the way down here. But what's confusing about this is they sold both gold and they sold the dollar. In both cases, you see there was pretty net bearish activity going on these two assets. So gold and the US dollar both getting sold is pretty interesting. But let's still take a look at something else. Gold got sold, but still the proportion overall of long percentage, right? So net positioning right here, this column, you want to look at this. Gold is still very net bullish on a longer term basis. But in the latest filing, in the latest week, the week to week change, there was some pretty significant selling. So I'm going to hold on to my gold trade. You can see that this also impacted the score negatively within the Edge Finder's top setups algorithm. You can see gold drop down to a +4 neutral reading. So I'm going to hold my trade, meaning if this thing rolls over and stops me out, then it is what it is. I may still like the trade if something changes going forward, but I'm just going to hold the trade. This is how I typically, do my trading is if the Edge Finder gives me a setup, that's great. I take the trade, I find the technical setup, and then I just let it play out. Even if the Edge Finder score changes or something like that, I still will stick with the trade idea and just stop out if need be. So that's where I'm at with gold. Taking a quick look at silver, you can see silver actually starting to look pretty good here, trying to recapture that previous high around 34.60. So we'll see if we can get back there. I mentioned oil earlier. Oil prices staying down are a positive thing for the inflation story in terms of global developments. We want oil prices to stay low. The other thing is oil prices will go lower if more peace talks take place between Russia and Ukraine. That is another catalyst, right? That can drive oil prices lower as Russia is a major producer of oil, and more free trade between Russia and Europe and other places would be positive for the supply of oil in the global scenario. So something to think about there. Quick look at let's go to where is it? There it is, euro dollar. I am still looking. Well, let me just double check where we're at. So pound dollar, euro dollar, Aussie dollar. These are still on the buy list for me if we do get some retracements. So there's euro dollar. Pound dollar still watching this area around 1.31, and then the Australian dollar and Kiwi dollar. Australian dollar sitting at resistance. I'd like to see this thing either break and retest, or probably going to skip on that one. And then a Kiwi dollar just waiting for this retest to like 58.00 for some potential entries on that front. Silver is in the bullish category, so I mentioned that a second ago. Looking for on silver probably a break and retest if we can get it, right? Some sort of break of this past high would get me interested in silver. Would probably also be, at the same time, we'd see gold ripping through those highs. So we'll see what happens there. Yields fell on Friday. That was a good thing. We want to see yields falling, not too much, right? Because that would signal recession. But we want to see yields falling in order to get the Fed to cut interest rates. That's a dollar bearish catalyst. So we'll see. If that can persist going forward. I do want to just remind you that the Edgefinder sale is ending soon. I know this is a shortened version of my weekly videos that I usually do. Like I said, I'm on vacation and just wanted to get out some of my hottest ideas. So watching NASDAQ out of the gate, managing a gold trade going into this week, and a couple other currency pairs on the watch list. Hopefully this was helpful to you. Make sure to hit the thumbs up button, subscribe. Thanks for watching.